You know the moment. It arrives wrapped in someone's sincere tone, their eyes looking directly at you. They say something you might have secretly wished to hear, something you know in some quiet, logical part of your mind is probably true. And instead of feeling a warm wave of recognition, you feel a sudden sharp urge to escape. Your body tenses, your mind races to find the nearest exit. You deflect, you deny, you make a joke, or you quickly return a compliment twice as large to shift the spotlight away. The words land somewhere near you, but you don't let them in. You don't know how to hold them. And after the moment passes, you replay it, wondering why you couldn't just say thank you, wondering why a kind word from another person feels less like a gift and more like a test you're about to fail. This isn't about false modesty. You're not pretending to be humble to seem more likable. It runs deeper than that. It's an internal reflex, one that operates faster than your conscious thought. The moment a compliment arrives, it triggers a subtle but powerful conflict inside you. On one side, there's a familiar story you tell yourself about who you are, a story built from years of self-assessment, old criticisms, and carefully held limitations. On the other side, there's this new piece of information that doesn't fit into that story. And because the brain craves consistency more than it craves accuracy, it rejects the new information. It's not that you don't believe the compliment is true, it's that accepting it would require you to dismantle a version of yourself you've spent a long time building, and that feels dangerous. Let's look at what this moment actually feels like. The compliment comes, it's specific and genuine. Someone says, "You handled that conversation so well," or "You're really good at making people feel seen," or "You've changed a lot and it's impressive." In the split second after, your internal narrator doesn't say, "Oh, how nice." It says something else. It says, "They don't know the full story. They didn't see how anxious I was. They don't know about that mistake I made right before." It finds the counter-argument instantly. It reminds you of all the evidence that contradicts the compliment, evidence that feels more real because it has been with you longer. And then the physical reaction follows. You feel a tightness in your chest. You feel exposed. You might even feel a strange sense of guilt, as if you've accidentally tricked this person into seeing you as better than you actually are. So you rush to correct their perception. You tell them why they're wrong. You give them the real version of you, the one you trust.
What's happening here is a classic conflict between two fundamental brain systems. The first is your cognitive self-evaluation system, the part of you that holds your self-schema. Think of this as a map you've drawn of yourself over your entire life. This map includes your weaknesses, your past failures, your perceived flaws. It's not necessarily accurate, but it's detailed and familiar. Your brain uses this map to predict how the world will treat you. And for the brain, predictability is safety. The second system is your reward processing system, the part that registers social approval and validation. When someone gives you a genuine compliment, it activates this reward system. Dopamine is released. It's supposed to feel good. But for someone who struggles to accept compliments, what happens next is critical. Before the reward system can fully do its job, the self-evaluation system jumps in. It runs a rapid conflict detection check. It asks, does this new piece of information match the map? If the answer is no, your brain flags it as an inconsistency. And an inconsistency to the brain is a problem that needs to be resolved immediately. The fastest way to resolve it is to reject the new information. You deflect, you argue, you diminish, and in doing so, you restore the consistency of your internal map. The tension goes away. You feel safe again. But you also feel the quiet, familiar disappointment of having pushed connection away. You've traded the risk of being seen for the comfort of being right about yourself. And because this process happens in milliseconds, you never get to make a conscious choice. You're just left with the aftermath, wondering why you can't let anything good in. There's a name for this pattern in personality theory. It's often tied to what psychologists call an insecure self-concept. This doesn't mean you lack confidence in every area. It means the story you hold about yourself is brittle. It has sharp edges. It has conditions. When your self-concept is brittle, any new information that contradicts it feels like a threat to the entire structure. You can't just add the compliment to the map because the map doesn't have a flexible foundation. Accepting the compliment would mean redrawing the map entirely, and that's too overwhelming to do in a 3-second interaction. So your brain chooses the path of least resistance. It protects the map. And you walk away from the interaction feeling misunderstood, but you also feel a strange sense of relief. You've maintained the continuity of who you are, even if who you are is a person who pushes kindness away. Here's the reframe that matters. You are not broken for this. You are not incapable of receiving love or recognition. This pattern is not a character flaw. It is an adaptation. It is a sophisticated, deeply ingrained survival strategy that your brain developed for a reason. For many people, this pattern begins early. It starts when the feedback you received as a child was conditional or inconsistent, or when praise was so rare that when it came, it felt untrustworthy.
Your brain learned that it was safer to deflect kindness than to risk being disappointed later. It learned that if you keep your own expectations of yourself low, you can never be let down by others. It learned that accepting a compliment meant opening a door that might be slammed shut, so it built a system to keep that door closed. And that system worked. It protected you. But now it's protecting you from something that isn't a threat anymore. It's a system running on old software. The hardware is fine. The system itself is not a flaw, it's just outdated. So the question shifts from how do I learn to accept compliments to how do I update the internal map so it can integrate new information without triggering a threat response. This is where we can work with the brain instead of against it, because your brain is not trying to make you miserable, it's trying to keep you consistent, it's trying to keep you safe. And if you want to change how you respond to compliments, you have to show your brain that inconsistency does not equal danger, that updating the map is not a destruction of the self, it's an expansion. Let's walk through a framework that works with the actual mechanisms driving this pattern. The first step is to separate acknowledgment from belief. When a compliment comes, your brain instantly asks you to either fully accept it or fully reject it. But those are not the only two options. You can practice a third option. You can simply acknowledge the compliment without deciding whether you believe it. You can say, "I hear you," or "Thank you for saying that," without internally agreeing or disagreeing. This works because it bypasses the conflict detection system. You're not asking your brain to integrate a contradiction, you're just asking it to register that someone else has had an experience of you. You're holding the compliment outside yourself for a moment, like a museum piece. You don't have to take it home, you just don't have to throw it away immediately. In a real-life moment, this looks like pausing for 2 seconds before you respond. It looks like letting the words sit in the air without your usual reflex rushing in to clean them up. It looks like saying, "I appreciate that," and then stopping. The other person doesn't need you to agree with them, they just need you not to argue with them. And by not arguing, you've already changed the pattern. The second step is to notice the physical sensation before the mental argument. The rejection of a compliment doesn't start as a thought, it starts as a sensation in the body, a tightening, a heat, a sudden drop. Your brain's threat detection system activates before your prefrontal cortex even gets a chance to weigh in. So if you can train yourself to notice the physical sensation without immediately acting on it, you create a gap. In that gap, you have a choice. You can let the sensation be there without letting it dictate your behavior. This is grounded in the neuroscience of interoception, your brain's ability to sense the internal state of your body. When you can simply notice the discomfort without needing to resolve it, you teach your brain that the discomfort is not a command, it's just a signal, and signals can be acknowledged without being obeyed. In practice, when a compliment lands and you feel that familiar contraction, you take one slow breath before speaking. You don't try to relax, you don't try to talk yourself out of it, you just notice. And then you respond from that slightly slower place. This single pause is often enough to interrupt the automatic deflection loop. The third step is to separate the compliment from the story of unworthiness. The reason compliments feel dangerous is that your brain connects them to a deep, often unspoken fear.
The fear is not that the compliment is false. The fear is that if you accept it, you'll be expected to maintain whatever it praised. You'll be exposed. You'll be revealed as someone who doesn't deserve it. Your brain thinks it's protecting you from that future failure by rejecting the compliment now. But here's what's happening in the brain. The anticipation of future failure activates the same neural networks as actual failure. Your brain experiences the imagined future disappointment as real in the present moment. So when you reject a compliment, you're not avoiding disappointment. You're manufacturing it in advance. You're paying the cost of the failure before it even happens. To work with this, you can practice a simple mental reframe. Tell yourself, this compliment is about a moment. It is not a contract for the rest of my life. Accepting a compliment for a single instance does not mean you must be perfect in that area forever. You're not signing a lifelong commitment. You're just allowing someone to appreciate one thing, one time. That's all it is. When you separate the act from the expectation, the threat level drops. The fourth step is to build what psychologists call self-concept clarity. The reason your internal map is so rigid is that it's built on shaky ground. It's not that you know yourself too well, it's that you've defined yourself by your limitations more than your capacities. When your self-concept is built mostly on what you're not, any evidence of what you are feels destabilizing. So you need to slowly, intentionally add more data to the map. Not in a positive thinking way, but in a factual way. You start by keeping a record of compliments you receive, not to boost your ego, but to build a more complete data set. You write them down without judgment. You simply collect them. Over time, your brain begins to see that these pieces of information exist in reality. They are not hallucinations from well-meaning people, they are data points, and a map built on more data points is more stable. It can hold both the things you struggle with and the things you're good at without collapsing. When your self-concept is clear, a compliment doesn't threaten the structure. It just adds a detail to an already detailed picture.
The fifth step is to recognize that accepting a compliment is not about you. This is the most counterintuitive shift, but it's crucial. When you deflect a compliment, you think you're protecting yourself, but you're also subtly rejecting the person who offered it. You're telling them your perception is wrong. You're shutting down the connection they were trying to make. To accept a compliment is not an act of arrogance. It is an act of generosity. It allows the other person to feel seen in their act of seeing you. It completes a small circuit of human connection. When you say thank you, you're not saying I'm perfect. You're saying I see that you saw something. Thank you for telling me. This shifts the focus from your internal conflict to the relationship itself, and relationships, unlike self-judgments, are built on moments of mutual recognition. Your brain is wired to respond to social connection. When you frame acceptance as a way of honoring that connection, the threat response quiets. It becomes less about you and more about the space between you and the other person. Now, let's bring all of this into one simple mental model you can carry with you. Imagine your internal self is a room. For a long time, you've kept the room in a certain arrangement. The furniture is placed exactly where you're used to it. You know where the dark corners are. You know where the broken things are kept. This arrangement feels like home. When someone offers you a compliment, it's like they're handing you a new piece of furniture, something that looks nice but doesn't fit your current layout. Your first instinct is to refuse it, to push it back out the door, because putting it in would mean rearranging everything, and rearranging feels chaotic. But here's what you've been missing. The room is not made of stone, it's made of thought, and thoughts can be rearranged without destruction. You don't have to throw out the old furniture to make space for the new. You can simply set the new piece in a corner and let it sit there for a while. Let it exist alongside the familiar. Over time, you might find that the room feels more complete with it there. Not crowded, just more accurately furnished. The goal is not to redesign the room overnight. The goal is to stop treating the delivery man as a threat, to let the new pieces in even if you don't know where they'll go yet, because the room is yours. You are the one who decides what stays.
So the next time someone hands you a kind truth, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to wear it as a badge. You don't have to prove it's true. You just have to not push it away. Let it land. Let it exist in the air between you. And if you can do that, if you can let one small piece of goodness stay in the room for a moment longer than you usually do, you've already changed the pattern. You've shown your brain that inconsistency is not a catastrophe, that connection is not a trap, that you can hold a kind word without losing yourself. And over time, the room gets rearranged, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped guarding the door.